Hello and welcome to Rock Your Block. I am your host, Tia Young. Today we are going to talk about learning how to live well and prepare well when it comes to planning end-of-life cycles. Our special guest has been on this show several times as a guest and as a co-host. She has recently opened a new division of her company, a cremation and funeral home in Springfield, Virginia. After the break, you will meet licensed funeral director Tremain Bradley, who works with our guests. Please welcome Ruth Pegeron of Laid to Rest Cremation and Funeral Home to Rock Your Block. Hello, Ruth. How are you?
Hello, Tia. I'm well, thank you.
Good. It's so good to have you back again.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here and honored to be here.
Yes, you see, I'm trying to make it a regular thing here.
I see. I like it. It's such an important topic, so
Yes,
I'm so
yes.
glad that you find it important as well.
Good.
So thank you.
Well, let's get started. You have opened a new division of your business
Yes.
a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
So why don't you tell us a little bit, just tell us a little bit about your background for people, perhaps they didn't see our earlier shows, just a little bit about your background, and then talk about Laid to Rest Cremation and Funeral Home.
Okay, well, thank you, Tia. Yeah, my background, as you know, is pretty vast. The older you get, the more you've done, right?
Yeah.
But I landed in the death care industry by taking care of my own mother. I left my first career, started taking care of my mother when she went terminally ill. And during that process, all the professionals around us, the hospice providers, her doctors, really said that we were comfortable with death and that when I did return to a career, I should consider death care. So that's what I did after she passed away. I made that my mission to explore that option. And, I guess 10 years later, she died in 2010. So 10 years later, I've just been building my resume, if you will, as I've decided to re-career. And actually, I don't think I really decided. I'm very, very connected to a Heavenly Father that I think
Decided for you.
really kind of led me that way. So 10 years I've been building this brand. I spent 5 years working for a large death care provider, and now I have my own and have divisions in it. So thank you.
Well, this show is dedicated today about preparing for the end of life. This is a subject that, everybody knows that one day, we're going to have to transition from this earth. But for some reason, we don't like to talk about it. We don't like to deal with it. And in my workings with different people, it's like when it happens, you're never prepared. You're never ready. It's so much about the subject that we don't know. So hopefully today, you can talk to us a little bit more about that. I mean, I have questions, but before I ask you the questions that I have, I want to know what do you run into people that are having a hard time and they don't want to talk about it, or they run from you when they find out what you do?
Yes.
They get away from you as fast as they can.
As fast as they can. Yes, I mean, fast as they can. It is. It's it's the only thing we all have in common, and we talk the least about. So it's perplexing. Who wants to talk about not being with their loved ones anymore, not being in what they know, which is right here with each other. Right. So it's very uncomfortable. It's usually a little bit more comfortable to talk about someone you're responsible for. If it's your parents or your grandparents, usually people are more comfortable to talk about, well, what we're going to do for them. But when people talk about themselves, it's just very uncomfortable, and it's not the most positive topic. Right. So I try to approach it in a very open, very comfortable way, just to say that, well, the emotion we can never change, but you can make it a little bit easier if you at least handle the business side. Right. And that is just tell your loved ones, your family, or whoever's responsible for you, what your choices are. Even as simple as, do you want to be cremated or a full body buried? Right. That starts the whole conversation. Right. And you'll find that it's really a topic that becomes very, very comfortable once you just embrace it and connect to it.
Right. Well, I have a question, and this is something that has been on my mind for a number of years. My brother passed of prostate cancer in 2015, and he died in the hospital. And one of the things I always wondered about is what happened after he passed? How was he transported from the hospital? And so I'm wondering what happens when people die in their homes, or if it is in a nursing home or a hospital. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Sure. So one of our divisions actually is a mortuary transportation portion, which is we do that. We actually go to hospitals, nursing homes, and it really just depends on, you know, where you die, the timing of your transportation. So you will be transported in either a hearse or a van, and there's special equipment just like ambulances, you know, where they have stretchers, and it's really the same process. As you know, when someone passes away, they call companies like ourselves, or they call the funeral home, who then deploys their team. So every funeral home probably has some type of team that does mortuary transportation. And usually everybody that works in a funeral home has done it or does do it, pick up a loved one from wherever they are. So if it's in a residence and they were under hospice, we'll go there and pick them up. It's just a little bit easier process because hospice can, you know, pronounce the death. If they're in a hospital or a facility, some of those have morgues. So a person that passes away is definitely resting well in the facility, in their morgue, until, you know, we can pick them up and take them to the funeral home that the family or the designee has decided on for them.
Right.
So they're very well taken care of.
Okay. Now earlier you mentioned something about full body service, embalming, cremation. Can you make distinctions between that we can understand?
Yes, absolutely. You know, and I think that's where my passion and love for this comes, is that, you know, when we are in the state, when we pass, or when we're talking about it, or the decisions, there's only two you start with. One is your final disposition. That means, I call it a lump, because after you don't have breath, you know, you really become like a lump, and it kind of lightens the mood. So, you know, we're very comfortable talking about where our assets will go. And I like to ask people, where is the asset is going to go that got you all the assets? And which is your mind, your body, you know, that helped you all your life get your assets. But we focus on where those things are going to go. So if we just focus on where our asset of our body is going to go, it's really, you start with two choices. Am I going to be cremated, or am I going to be full body buried into a cemetery? And if you start with those two, then the rest comes naturally. And that's a very big decision.
Okay. For cremation, how long does that take? For cremation?
The cremation process itself?
Yes.
Oh, do you mean the actual physical cremation?
Right.
Oh, it varies, for sure. But it can be from 2 to 3 hours. It can be up to 4 hours. It just depends on the person, the time of day, things like that go into the process. But about 2 hours.
Can the family be there doing that process, or that's not the process that you recommend families?
Oh, yes. Families, you know, they can do, there's something called witness cremation. And basically what that means is that the family can see when their loved one is going into the cremation tort. So they can actually see.
The cremation.
It's called a tort, T-O-R-T.
T-O-R-T, tort.
Tort.
Okay, okay.
So most funeral homes can schedule what we call a witness cremation, and it's scheduled, and the family or designee can see when the loved one is just placed in the tort, and that's all they can see. But, you know, they can't stay and watch anything else, but they can at least see when the loved one is placed there.
Okay, that's good. Now, cremation is something, when I grew up, and I'm not going to tell people how old I am, in our culture, you didn't really hear a lot about cremation. It was a full body service, a burial, and that type of thing.
Yes.
So now I'm hearing more about people doing cremation. Can you speak to that? Are you finding that out? Is that happening?
Oh, absolutely. Cremation have been on the rise, at least for even the past 10 years. And it's a variety of reasons that people are choosing cremation. On the West Coast, cremation is way more popular than it is on the East Coast. I don't want to quote the percentage, but it's very high. So it's very normal there. But it's for a lot of different reasons. People just have a difference in choice. Someone in the family started it by just doing it, and they're seeing that, oh, this is not so bad. There are a lot of people that are environmentalists, so they want to save the earth and not, have their remains placed in the earth and have to move trees. And so a lot of eco-friendly people. It's still very important from a cost standpoint. Cremation is perceived to be less expensive. And not necessarily on the funeral side. Some people still have full viewings in the traditional that you're speaking of. However, the cost savings can come when you talk about not having the burial expenses. So it just depends on your personal, family, rituals, values, traditions, customs. Our Jewish community, they don't have a high cremation even to this day, although they're doing it. We know Catholics, they believe in cremation now, and they've approved it, the Pope, many years ago. However, you still need to have a proper burial in a cemetery, and a priest still needs to bless it. So everybody is still very different. I'm seeing that with the African American community. A lot of times they still do the viewing, the full-fledged funeral, and then afterwards they just don't have the procession, they'll have the cremation. So our Muslim community, they haven't started cremation at all. A lot of our Latino community, they don't do cremation at all. So it's everybody just is a little bit different. Yes, so we just embrace them all.
We have a little less than a minute to go before we go to the break, but I want you to talk a little bit about what your most rewarding feeling has been about your job that you do.
Serving people on the worst day of their lives. Being in a position where my compassion is acceptable. I spent 17 years in a corporate environment where sometimes compassion made you soft. And it's just in my DNA. I'm very compassionate, very kind. And this gives me the opportunity to really show that to people. And the most rewarding is when you get the emails back. Or the thanks,
the thank
of how kind or how I made it. I didn't necessarily make it better, but I made it easier
for them.
Yes.
Ruth, I want to thank you so much, and I mean, we just touched just a small part of the surface, so you definitely will have to come back. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Well, it's time for a short break. We will return with funeral director Tremain Bradley. So don't touch that dial. We're back. You're watching Rock Your Block with our special guest, Tremain Bradley, licensed funeral director and embalmer at Lay to Rest Funeral Home and Cremation. Tremain, welcome so much to the second part of our show. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate
to be
it.
there.
Good. So we're going to get started.
Okay.
Because I got a couple of questions for you. Now, you have been in the cremation funeral business since 2008.
That is correct.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the things that you've done, and then also add in there for young people 17 and above who might be watching us and may consider this as a business? If you could talk a little bit about the type of education they will need, the kinds of schools that they need to go to.
Okay. There's community colleges that they can attend for mortuary science, and there's also just mortuary science schools that they can attend. I attended Worsham College from 2013 to 2014, so it didn't take that long. Classes you have to take is anatomy, microbiology, pathology, accounting, business law.
Whoa.
Have to take an embalming lab. Classes like that.
Wow, and you did all that in 1 year?
Yes, yes.
And you're certified, you're licensed after that time, or is there more?
You have to take what you called a national board exam, And you take that, I'm sorry, first you have to do an apprenticeship at a local funeral home,
Okay.
an apprenticeship or internship. And you take your national board exam, which is 2 parts, it's a science and arts. And once you take those, depending on what state you live in, you also have to take your state board exam.
Wow. So tell us about some of the projects that you've worked on and some of the things you've done.
As an embalmer, I'm more what you call in the back opposed to the front. I've worked on several cases that were quite difficult, but some that were easy. Also, I'm in the transportation business, so I've done a lot of removals,
Transporting, yeah.
which have been quite an experience. But I started, like I said, I started back in 2008. I started for a company called Anatomy Gifts Registry, and I learned how to do procurements, which is a body donation facility, and that was very rewarding. And I learned a lot just starting out there. And I started as a crematory operator, and I was very curious about the procurement part of it. So I asked my boss if I could get trained on that. And he said, yes, of course. And once I got into it, I enjoyed it very much. Yes, I did.
When you say crematory operator, what position, what does that person do?
That person actually cremates the decedents.
Okay.
And like the process takes 3 to 4 hours, depending on the average size of the weight of the body.
So are you responsible for managing the heat when you turn up?
Yes.
The oven and stuff like that, okay.
Yes, you are.
Okay.
It goes up to a certain temperature, and then once you reach that temperature, you place the decedent inside we call it retort.
Okay.
And yes, you do control the heat, and it's quite difficult, but you can manage it.
You can manage it,
Yes.
yes. I'm still back taking accounting and business law and all those anatomy and all of that. Whoa. Now, your expertise, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, is, as you said earlier, embalming, and then there's something called cosmetics and casketing. I've never heard of that together. Can you talk a little bit about what that actually is, what that means?
Sure. Once the person is embalmed, you dress them and you cosmetize them, which is you just put on light makeup, and there's certain different kinds of makeup to make them look presentable for the viewing and for the families. It's not a hard process, but you want to make it perfect because you want them to look natural as possible.
Right.
And you don't want to over cosmetize them. You don't want to under cosmetize them.
Right. That's
Just naturally.
right.
So, yes.
Now, I understand that you and Ruth put your whole operation together, and you're there as the embalmer and helping her with things like that. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know I dropped by the office one day, and you guys were just doing all kinds of things. You were in the refrigerator doing things. You were all over the place. So I was thinking, well, what did you do? I mean, what are some of the things you did to put that operation together?
Well, first of all, you definitely need the capital. You need to find the perfect area that will allow a funeral home and cremation. We started off with just an empty building, and we had the necessary resources to buy our cooler, our embalming table, our embalming station, and then from there we just worked on getting urns and little keepsakes and all the necessary paperwork together, and just to make it all come together.
Right, right.
Yes.
If we had, say, high school students in the room with us right now, what is it that you would tell them to do if they were interested in this as a career? What would you tell them to start doing right now? Let's say it's a 10th grader, somebody in the 10th grade that is really thinking seriously about making this a career. How would you advise them?
I would advise them to ask themselves, are they really sure this is what they want to do? It's a very rewarding career.
But it's hard, I bet.
No, it's not that hard.
It's not that hard?
Once you get into it, it's not that hard. And just doing research about death and funeral homes and picking which state they would like to work in, and to just write a list of each school, each mortuary school that would be best for them. And also, once they do that, finish that, just go around to different funeral homes and ask if you could volunteer.
Oh, okay, that's good.
Yes, just to do it for free. You would do anything.
Right.
You know, wash the hearse, clean the chapel if they have a chapel, rake leaves, cut the grass, anything just to get your foot in the door to help you. Then once you get in, you can just see all the behind work and all the front work of what goes on in a funeral home.
That's really good. I never thought about, you know, going to try and get for teenagers to go and try and work in a funeral home. Yeah, that's very interesting. I asked Ruth this question. I'm going to ask the same question of you. In your opinion, why do you think people are so uneasy, or maybe even outright fearful, about any discussion that has to deal with death or about the funeral industry?
Well, when I tell someone that I'm in the funeral business or I'm a funeral director, they give me a very strange look.
Like,
yes.
I didn't make the sign of cross.
And then they get curious. They start asking me different questions like you're asking me now. And it's just, okay. And, you know, I might ask someone, do you ever think you could be in the business? And they'd be like, no, no. But then you have others that are very curious, that want to see the process of embalming and cremation. And I tell them, hey, if you really want to do it, you know, go for it. But, you know, I get a lot of questions, and it's so funny. And I think it's just the fear of the unknown,
Right.
you know, after you pass away.
Right.
And, you know, because growing up, you know, you've looked at certain horror movies, and of course, nowadays with the whole zombie type of thing, you know, it's very fearful, but it's really not.
Right.
It's really not. It's very peaceful.
Right. And in the business that you are in, do you also get into like consulting when people come in and they're just so distraught? They're just so distraught that you can hardly talk to them. Do you get involved in that, or do you have a psychologist or somebody that you can call up or that works with you to help those people that are just so distraught?
Well, it's both, actually. I mean, there are therapists that we call that will come out and have grief support, which is very good. And sometimes, you know, people just, even when you go do a removal, people just want to talk.
Yeah.
They just want to let it out, you know, just to have a relief. And you just listen to them, and, you know, they tell you all about their loved one, you know, what they went through, what kind of person they were. And you just listen, and you just give them a big hug and tell them everything is going to be okay.
That's good. So it's a lot of phases, a lot of parts to being in the funeral business.
It is.
Yes.
It is.
Well, the last question, and because we're almost out of time, but we have enough time for you to give me a good answer.
Okay.
What is the most rewarding part or feeling about your job? What really makes you, you know, in the morning you're ready to go, ready to help somebody?
Because the majority of what I do is embalming. The most rewarding for me is once I embalmed, once I dress them, make them look real nice, cosmetize them. And when you present them, you sit them out in the chapel, you place them in the chapel, and the family comes in, and it's that first look. And it's like, wow, they didn't look like that in the hospital.
Yeah.
Or it's like, you know, they may shed a tear, and it's like, I can't believe it. That's rewarding for me, because a lot of times, and then a lot of times the funeral director will come back and say, you really did a nice job. They were very pleased the way their loved one looked. And that's a very rewarding opportunity for me. Yes. I really like that.
Right. And you know, you're saying that and it's bringing back memories to me because as I told Ruth earlier, my brother died of prostate cancer in 2015 and he died in a hospital. And he had lost a lot of weight and, you know, I was shuddering as we were walking through the funeral to wonder, you know, how was he going to look? And I was so grateful. It was just like he was asleep, and at any moment, you know, he could wake up and give us a hug or something. And so it was very gratifying to know that somebody had the skill enough to do that. Tremain, thank you so much for coming, and you're welcome here anytime. I know that we only touched the surface, and I know there's more in you that I want to pull out and have you share with us.
Sure, anytime.
So will you come back?
Yes, I will.
Okay,
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Well, thank you for watching Rock Your Block with our special guests, Ruth Pegeron and Tremain Bradley of Lay to Rest Cremation and Funeral Home. If you have questions for our guests about today's segment, their information is scrolling on your television screen right now. Please tune in next week for another great show on Rock Your Block. I'm Tia Young, your host and producer, wishing you a wonderful day. Bye-bye.